Forget boring fines or overcrowded cells. Imagine standing before a judge who sentences you to a mandatory date at Red Lobster or a long walk with a llama. Some legal minds have traded the law book for a script, turning the courtroom into a stage for psychological warfare and public humiliation. We've unearthed 48 real cases where the punishment was so bizarre, it's a wonder they're legal. 1. In Montana, a judge realized that for a modern harasser, a prison cell is nothing compared to a total digital blackout. After a woman launched a relentless campaign of online abuse, sending thousands of toxic messages, she wasn't just fined, she was legally exiled to the 19th century. The court banned her from owning or even touching any device with internet access for 3 years. In a world where your entire social and professional life lives in the cloud, being forcibly disconnected is a social death sentence that makes a jail yard look cozy. 2. When a notorious slumlord named Nicholas Dionyasopoulos was caught ignoring endless health violations, the judge skipped the standard fine and chose pure poetic justice instead. He sentenced Nicholas to house arrest, but with a brilliant catch. He had to live in one of his own crumbling, rat-infested units. With no heat and broken plumbing, he remained a prisoner of his own neglect until every single repair in the building was finished. It wasn't just a punishment, it was a mandatory crash course in empathy through the medium of cold, damp misery. 3. A teenager convicted of sending hundreds of threatening texts received a punishment that combined modern tech with ancient psychological warfare. The judge didn't take away his phone, he just downgraded it to a 20-year-old flip phone. For 6 months, the teen was legally barred from using a smartphone, forced to rediscover the agonizing labor of T9 texting. Imagine trying to send an angry rant when you have to tap the 7 button 4 times just to get a single letter S. It's justice through extreme low-tech inconvenience. 4. 2 teenagers in New Mexico learned that shoplifting in the 21st century can still earn you a 14th century public humiliation. A judge ordered them to walk 20 miles through the center of town while leading a donkey named Gidget. To make sure every neighbor got the message, the donkey carried a large sign detailing their specific crimes. It's a bizarre sight. Kids who likely spent their lives on TikTok suddenly paraded around like disgraced peasants from the Middle Ages. Apparently, Gidget the donkey was the only one who actually enjoyed the afternoon stroll. 5. In Ohio, a man who called a police officer a pig found out that Judge Michael Ticconetti has a very literal sense of humor. The man was sentenced to spend 2 full hours on a busy street corner, standing next to an actual 350-pound hog. He was also required to hold a sign clarifying that the farm animal was not, in fact, a member of the local police force. It's a masterclass in using absurdity to defend the badge, turning a routine insult into a live-action comedy sketch for the entire city to enjoy. 6. After a woman stiffed a taxi driver for a 30-mile ride, an Ohio judge gave her a choice: 60 days in the local lockup or walking the entire distance herself within 48 hours. She chose the hike. This wasn't just a punishment, it was a physical manifestation of her debt. The judge forced her to earn back the miles she stole, one painful blister at a time. It's the kind of sentence that doesn't just punish you, it gives you a deep, personal understanding of exactly how long 30 miles feels on your feet. 7. A Houston man with a repeat history of drunk driving received a sentence that moves past legal correction into the realm of permanent psychological weight. Along with his other penalties, the judge ordered him to carry a photo of the people he had killed in a previous accident inside his wallet at all times. He was legally mandated to look at that image every single day. This isn't just about following the law. It's an inescapable, lifelong confrontation with the ghost of a decision that can never be taken back, regardless of the time served. 8. A Cleveland woman was so outrageously rude to her bus driver that a judge decided to force a total personality transplant. She was sentenced to stand at a bus stop wearing a sign that admitted to her bad behavior. But the real kicker? She had to hand out free bus passes to every commuter who walked by for 2 straight days. The court essentially turned a public nuisance into a mandatory public servant, forcing her to be the face of generosity at the very scene where she had originally caused so much chaos. 9. After a Utah man unleashed a tirade of profanity at local police officers, a judge decided to transform him from a public menace into a mandatory barista. For a full month, he was required to stand outside the station during the morning shift change, handing out coffee and donuts to every officer with a polite, "Have a nice day." It's hard to keep up the tough guy act when you're legally obligated to serve sugary treats and smiles to the very people you were screaming at only a few weeks prior. 10. A woman convicted of abandoning her dog in a house so filthy that rescuers needed hazmat suits was given a visceral taste of her own medicine. Judge Cicconetti sentenced her to spend 8 hours sitting alone in the local garbage dump. She wasn't there to work or clean, she was there to simply sit in the stench and reflect. The judge wanted her to feel the exact same isolation and filth her pet endured. It's a sensory punishment designed to make sure she never forgets the smell of her own neglect. 11. After an Ohio woman abandoned 35 kittens in local parks, a judge decided she needed a taste of that same vulnerability. Her sentence didn't involve a standard cell. Instead, she was ordered to spend a night alone in the woods without food, water, or even a basic tent. To finish the job, she had to pay for a full-page newspaper ad featuring her mugshot and the kittens, effectively broadcasting her shame to the entire community. It's a literal lesson in abandonment that turned the predator into the prey, one cold night at a time. 12. There's a special tier of karma for those who steal from Salvation Army kettles at Christmas. And for one Ohio man, that karma was freezing cold. Judge Cicconetti sentenced him to spend Christmas Eve completely alone in a dark forest with only the barest survival supplies. The goal was simple: to make him feel the exact same cold, isolation, and desperation experienced by the homeless population he had stolen from. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a 24-hour masterclass in empathy delivered by the brutal, unforgiving chill of a winter night. 13. A group of young men in Oklahoma thought a quick game of football in a restricted river was harmless fun, but the judge saw it as a massive public health risk. Instead of a fine, he sentenced them to the local health department for an exhaustive battery of tests for every waterborne disease in the book. The real punishment wasn't the needles. It was the agonizing week spent waiting for lab results, weaponizing their own health anxiety to ensure they never trespass near a river again. It's justice through the power of medical paranoia. 14. When two Florida teens tagged a school bus with graffiti, they likely expected standard community service. Instead, they were handed a toothbrush and told to get to work. The judge ordered them to scrub every single inch of that massive vehicle, from the tires to the ceiling, using only the tiny bristles meant for dental hygiene. It wasn't just about cleaning the bus. It was about the mind-numbing, finger-cramping absurdity of the task, turning a momentary act of vandalism into a week-long nightmare of microscopic labor that no amount of scrubbing could erase from their memory. 15. In one of the most unorthodox displays of eye for an eye justice, an Ohio judge turned his courtroom into a barber shop. A woman appeared before him for a crime involving her daughter's hair, and the judge offered a bizarre bargain. He'd reduce her sentence if she let him chop off her own hair right then and there. She agreed, and with a few snips of common office scissors, the judge literally trimmed her ego. It's a wild reminder that sometimes the scales of justice are balanced with a ponytail and a very sharp pair of shears. 16. A New York scammer who drained the life savings of dozens of seniors found himself facing a punishment that targeted his greatest asset, his ego. The court forced him to use his deceptive expertise for the public good by hosting seminars on how to spot a con artist. Standing before an audience of potential victims, he had to detail his own dirty tricks and teach them how to defend themselves against people exactly like him. It's the ultimate humiliation, turning a master predator into a mandatory protector, effectively ruining his career and his reputation simultaneously. 17. When two grown men in Oklahoma decided to have a full-blown fistfight over a parking space, the judge treated them like the toddlers they were. He ordered a 1-hour timeout, but with a humiliating twist. They had to stand in a crowded public square and hold hands for the entire duration. There is no way to maintain your tough guy persona while being forced into a court-ordered buddy moment. The judge didn't just stop the violence. He absolutely nuked their social status through the power of forced awkward intimacy in front of every passerby with a smartphone. 18. A politician in Spain was caught in a web of lies so thick that the judge decided on a literary intervention. Instead of a traditional fine, the dishonest official was sentenced to read the entire story of Pinocchio aloud to a room full of elementary school children. Imagine the soul-crushing irony of sitting before innocent kids, narrating a cautionary tale about a puppet whose nose grows with every lie, while everyone in the room knows exactly who the real puppet is. It's a morality play where the villain is forced to be the storyteller of his own downfall. 19. After a man in Oklahoma City relentlessly harassed his ex-girlfriend with toxic messages, the judge prescribed a dose of forced chivalry. The sentence required him to buy her dinner and flowers, but the real torture was a writing assignment. He had to handwrite, "I will not call my ex-girlfriend a bad name," 100 times. To ensure the punishment was as tedious as possible, the judge mandated he use a calligraphy pen. This turned a crude crime into a long, slow exercise in crafting beauty out of his own stupidity, one ink-stained letter at a time. 20. Lying about military service, known as stolen valor, is a deep insult to those who served. An Arizona judge decided that the only way for one offender to understand the weight of his lie was through a grueling marathon of names. The man was sentenced to handwrite, in alphabetical order, all 6,056 soldiers from his state who died in combat since the Vietnam War. Then, he had to read every name aloud in a recorded session. It's a monumental task designed to drown a liar in the sheer reality of true sacrifice and honor. 21. A Texas man learned that faking a life-altering injury for an insurance payout comes with a heavy dose of reality. The judge sentenced him to spend a full day shadow living with a person who was genuinely paralyzed from the waist down. He wasn't just a spectator. He had to assist with every daily struggle, from basic movement to the grueling routines of a real disability. It was a mandatory perspective shift, forcing a greedy fraudster to witness the actual pain and resilience his fake accident had mocked. Sometimes the best cure for a lie is the unvarnished physical truth. 22. In Pennsylvania, a business owner who thought he could settle a debt with a bad check found himself facing a literal ton of consequences. The judge ordered him to pay the $2,000 fine in full, but with one massive catch: the currency had to be pennies. We're talking about over 200,000 individual coins weighing more than half a ton. The real punishment wasn't the cost, but the back-breaking logistical nightmare of hauling a literal mountain of copper to the courthouse to prove he finally understood the physical weight of financial responsibility. 23. When a man tried to pay for dinner at a restaurant with a hand-drawn $1 million bill, the judge didn't throw the book at him. He threw an art curriculum. Recognizing the crime was more hilarious than dangerous, the court sentenced him to 100 hours of community service at a local beginner's art class to improve his counterfeiting skills. It's the ultimate judicial eye roll, turning a failed scam into a mandatory hobby, and acknowledging that sometimes the only real crime is being a truly terrible artist. 24. An Oregon man who considered himself an anti-tax maverick discovered that the only thing worse than paying taxes is filing them for free. After his conviction for evasion, the judge sentenced him to 200 hours of community service inside the very bureaucracy he despised. He was assigned to the county clerk's office with the soul-crushing task of manually sorting and filing thousands of property tax documents. Instead of fighting the machine, he was forced to become a tiny silent gear within it, proving that the system always gets its due, one way or another. 25. We all know the person who steals a handicapped parking spot for a quick errand. A Florida judge, tired of the laziness, started offering these offenders a choice: a $500 fine or a full day as a parking lot monitor. For 8 hours, they had to patrol busy malls, photographing and reporting every single person misusing a disability permit. It's a brilliant psychological flip, forcing the rule breakers to become the ultimate rule enforcers, making them see the world through the eyes of the people they were previously inconveniencing for the sake of a shorter walk. 26. After a man was found guilty of severe animal neglect, leaving his dog alone for days without food or water, a judge decided he needed to see the broader reality he contributed to. He was sentenced to 80 hours of community service at a high-volume animal shelter. His specific task was to scrub the kennels and cages of hundreds of abandoned, lonely pets. Day after day, he was forced to lock eyes with the victims of neglect, a constant, silent reminder of the loyalty he so callously threw away. 27. Two Colorado teenagers who decided to blast profane rap music near a playground found their playlist forcibly updated by the law. Judge Paul Sacco offered a deal: pay the full fine or get an 80% discount by attending a 3-hour classical music concert. They were forced to sit through the complex works of Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, essentially subjecting their ears to a high-culture detox. It's a musical intervention designed to reboot their entire aesthetic operating system, trading hardcore bass for Baroque violins in the hopes of a more sophisticated future. 28. Some punishments feel more like a plot point from a sitcom than a legal ruling. When a husband and wife ended up in court after a heated domestic argument, the judge decided to skip the community service and play marriage counselor instead. He sentenced the husband to take his wife on a scripted reconciliation date, including flowers, formal attire, a trip to the bowling alley, and a dinner at Red Lobster. The court literally storyboarded their romance, ensuring that their path back to peace was paved with Cheddar Bay biscuits and forced quality time. 29. In Ohio, a woman who decided the sidewalk was a great shortcut to bypass a stopped school bus was transformed into a human traffic cone of shame. For 2 mornings, she had to stand at a busy intersection holding a massive sign that read, "Only an idiot would drive on the sidewalk to avoid a school bus." The judge didn't just want her to regret the move. He wanted her to be the local face of public stupidity. It was justice as performance art, branded onto her reputation for every passing neighbor to witness and laugh at. 30. When a speed demon named Andrew was clocked doing over 100 miles per hour, a judge decided a simple fine wouldn't touch his arrogance. Instead, he ordered a total lifestyle demolition. Andrew had to sell his high-performance sports car and use the proceeds to buy a yearly bus pass. For the next 12 months, the former racer was sentenced to the slow, humbling world of public transit schedules and crowded commutes. The judge didn't just take his license. He stripped him of his status symbol and forced him to rejoin the society he was recklessly endangering. 31. How do you humble a corporate CEO for defrauding his own staff? A Texas judge hit him exactly where his pride lived, at the company picnic. The CEO was sentenced to 8 hours in a dunk tank, serving as the main attraction for the very employees he had wronged. For one day, the hierarchy was flipped, and every worker he'd cheated got to take a shot at turning their boss into a dripping, humiliated spectacle. It's the kind of justice that isn't just served. It's thrown at 50 miles per hour by people with a very real grudge. 32. After a group of teenagers vandalized a historic church, a judge opted for a punishment of profound, consistent silence. He sentenced them to attend every single Sunday service for a full year. This wasn't about religious conversion, it was about forced proximity to the victims. Every week, they had to sit in the pews and look at the families and elderly members whose sacred space they had desecrated. It turned the building from a target into a community, aiming for a slow, quiet redemption that no fine could ever achieve. 33. A man who stole a rare historical book from a museum was given a sentence straight out of the 1700s. The judge ordered him to become the official town crier for a day. Dressed in a colonial tri-cornered hat and carrying a brass bell, he had to walk through the town square, ringing the bell and shouting his own confession, "Hear ye, I am a thief who stole from our history." The court essentially turned him into a living, breathing historical reenactment of his own stupidity, proving that some crimes are best punished with a heavy dose of public ridicule. 34. In Spain, a small-town mayor thought he could play fast and loose with building permits by illegally approving a vacation villa on a protected coastline. When justice finally caught up, the judge delivered a sentence of pure, unadulterated irony. The mayor was ordered to personally demolish the illegal structure himself using a sledgehammer. It wasn't just manual labor, it was a physical erasure of his own corruption. The very hands that signed the illegal permits were forced to swing the steel that brought the bricks down, ensuring his corrupt legacy ended in a pile of rubble. 35. An Alabama man caught stealing a prime rib roast from a grocery store faced a punishment that can only be described as gastronomic exile. Instead of a fine or jail time, the judge attacked the very source of the man's desire, his appetite. The court legally banned him from consuming any meat or poultry for an entire year. This sentence essentially forced him into mandatory vegetarianism, raising hilarious logistical questions about whether his parole officer conducted surprise bacon inspections. The judge didn't just punish a theft, he turned the man's own stomach into a culinary prison. 36. A California woman who stole hundreds of dollars from a local Girl Scout troop's cookie fund met a punishment of mythic proportions. Because the crime was so universally loathed, the judge sentenced her to spend a weekend standing outside a busy supermarket dressed in a giant, ridiculous chocolate chip cookie costume. On her chest was a sign detailing her crime and a public apology to the Scouts. She was forced to become a walking, life-sized monument to her own shameful greed, transforming her from a petty thief into a local laughingstock for everyone buying snacks. 37. A man who repeatedly terrorized his quiet neighborhood with a deafeningly loud motorcycle found his tough guy identity completely dismantled by the court. Recognizing that the roar of the engine was the man's pride and joy, the judge delivered a sentence of pure emasculation. He was legally forbidden from riding his bike for 6 months, and his only permitted mode of two-wheeled transport was a tiny 49cc moped. The judge didn't just silence the noise. He sentenced the biker to the unmistakable, high-pitched whine of total social and mechanical defeat. 38. While some judges punish noise polluters with bad music, a Connecticut judge opted for something far more terrifying: absolute silence. A man repeatedly cited for blasting his car stereo at deafening volumes was sentenced to 48 hours of solitary confinement. However, this wasn't a standard jail cell. It was a completely silent room with no TV, no phone, no books, and no radio. For a man addicted to constant noise, this sensory deprivation forced him to spend 2 days listening to nothing but his own thoughts, the ultimate torture for the chronically loud. 39. 2 teenagers caught spray painting vulgarities on a car ended up in front of the legendary Judge Michael Cicconetti. He offered them a classic Cicconetti choice: spend time in jail or shave each other's heads and beards right there in the middle of the courtroom. The teens chose the haircuts, with one of them actually breaking into tears as his beard was publicly buzzed off. The judge's logic was flawless. If you want to deface someone else's property, the court will start by defacing your own public image and your precious vanity. 40. An Ohio man who constantly parked his oversized truck on the sidewalk, forcing pedestrians and wheelchair users into traffic, faced a mandatory perspective shift. Judge Cicconetti sentenced him to spend an entire day navigating the town in a wheelchair. The goal was for him to experience the exact frustration and danger he had caused others. It wasn't just a penalty. It was a mandatory lesson in empathy that fundamentally altered his relationship with the world, forcing him to see the city from the vulnerable vantage point of the people he had previously ignored. 41. In Missouri, 2 teenagers who defaced a statue of a historical figure discovered that the judge considered ignorance to be the real crime. Their punishment was part academic research and part public theater. First, they had to write a 20-page history paper on the figure they had vandalized. Then, for the grand finale, they were required to dress in full historical costumes and deliver a public lecture on that figure's importance while standing directly in front of the damaged statue. The judge essentially forced them to become the official, embarrassed tour guides for their own crime scene. 42. When a defendant in an Illinois courtroom lost his cool and cursed directly at the judge, he received a sentence that turned his own voice against him. After a brief recess, the judge ordered the man to stand in the courthouse lobby for 4 hours. His task? He had to read a 1,000-word speech on the vital importance of respecting the judicial system to every single person who walked through the doors. It was a brilliant move that transformed the instrument of his crime, his mouth, into a tool for his own public re-education and humiliation. 43. A manufacturing company caught dumping toxic waste into a local river received a sentence of mandatory corporate camping. The CEO and 2 top executives, who claimed they were unaware of the dumping, were ordered to pitch tents and live on the banks of the poisoned river for 1 full week. They were required to drink filtered water sourced directly from the contaminated stream and live in the environmental disaster their negligence had created. It was a court-ordered field trip into the heart of their own failure, proving that accountability is best served outdoors. 44. A man who terrorized his neighbors with relentless, late-night parties found his lifestyle completely inverted by the court. He was sentenced to 40 hours of community service at the local public library's front desk. For an entire week, the loudmouth socialite was forced to become the guardian of the very peace he had shattered. Every time he felt the urge to be loud, he was legally obligated to whisper "shh" to students and seniors. The judge essentially sentenced him to live in a sanctuary of silence as a penance for his noisy arrogance. 45. 2 South Carolina teenagers who started a brush fire that spiraled out of control were given a reality check they would never forget. The judge didn't just fine them. He sentenced them to spend a weekend at the local hospital's burn unit. They weren't there to work. They were there to witness the agonizing recovery process and the devastating, life-altering injuries of actual burn victims. It was a visceral, sobering punishment that used the harsh reality of human suffering to ensure the boys understood that their prank could have ended in a permanent tragedy. 46. When a Kentucky man was arrested for being drunk and disorderly, the judge decided the apology should be as surreal as the incident itself. The man was ordered to deliver a formal, heartfelt public apology. But the audience wasn't the court. It was a police horse named PJ. The offender had to stand at the horse's stable and sincerely express his remorse while the animal stared back, presumably unimpressed. The judge's reasoning remains a mystery, but he effectively turned a standard legal proceeding into a piece of bizarre, performance art-style justice that no one involved will ever forget. 47. A notorious Missouri poacher was caught, but the judge knew a jail cell wouldn't change a cold heart. Instead, he ordered the man to watch the Disney classic Bambi once a month for the entirety of his year-long sentence. This is psychological warfare at its finest. The court weaponized childhood trauma, forcing a hardened hunter to sit through the agonizing death of a deer's mother over and over until the message finally stuck. It's a sentence that aimed not for the man's freedom, but for his very soul through the power of animated tragedy. 48. An Ohio man decided to pepper spray a pizza delivery driver just to steal a hot pie. The judge's response was a masterstroke of diabolical culinary justice. The thief was ordered to buy a fresh, large pizza for the driver and then sit and watch him eat the entire thing in silence. This wasn't about the money. It was a total power move. He was forced to witness the simple, cheesy joy he had violently tried to steal, turning a hot dinner into a cold, pathetic dish of public shame and regret. Justice is served, but is it fair or just a judge's twisted ego trip? If you held the gavel, which of your neighbors would you publicly humiliate first? Give us your most petty, unhinged sentencing ideas in the comments. Don't hold back. If you're not a coward, drop your verdict below. Smash like if the law is a joke, and subscribe to stay ahead of the chaos.